Hi, everybody, and welcome aboard to Local Matters 2018, where living local never felt so good. You know, opioid misuse, addiction, overdose, and death have become an epidemic in America. In fact, over the past 15 years, the nation's opioid epidemic has claimed more than 250,000 lives. This is according to the data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. In the last year alone, nearly 30,000 Americans have died from opioid overdoses. But you know what? In spite of these alarming numbers, there are those who beat the odds. And when we come back, we will meet one local woman who did just that. She beat the odds, and she's soaring and making a difference in her community. You know why? Because if it's local, it matters.
Dance. Let me see you move.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back. Thanks for joining us. You know, in the last year alone, nearly 30,000 Americans died from opioid overdoses. But you know what? In spite of these alarming numbers, there are those who beat the odds. Joining me on Local Matters is Miss Colony Hughes. She is an entrepreneur, and she's the owner of Seven Springs Ministry, along with her husband, Daniel. But just a few years ago, Colony probably could not have never imagined that she would be a role model, because she tells us that she was in trouble with drugs herself. And she's here to tell us how she overcame that problem. Welcome aboard, Miss Colony. Welcome aboard, Miss Colony. How are you?
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, welcome back. You know, you were here with us about, I think it was about 2 years ago. You and Daniel were here talking about the amazing work that you were doing with the with Seven Springs Ministries, by the way.
Yes.
And so it's good to have you here to tell us that some amazing work that you are continuing to do with the ministry, and you're expanding. But I want to find out a little bit more about how you're doing now, because so many people are really having trouble in areas of opioid abuse. At one point, Colony, you were there yourself. Share with us, how did you find yourself in such a dark place?
Sure. I've always had, since I was 13, I didn't have really a preference. I just, whatever type of drug there was, I would use. But predominantly later, as I got older, it was methamphetamines. And I can remember when it took a turn to opiates, because it was readily available. Oxycontin was actually more available than methamphetamines at that time.
What do you mean by it was readily available?
It was easier to get on the streets. Oxycontin was.
Okay.
You know, I never had any problem finding it. You know, it was always on the streets. Anytime there wasn't Oxycontin, we would go to heroin. But it just increased, and that was a lot different for me, because I had used meth. I was an IV meth user since I was 13, and I had done that. But when I started using opiates, it was completely different than anything I had ever done.
What do you mean by completely different? Help us to understand. What do you mean by it was completely different? Was it a different feeling?
It was a different feeling, and it was, my body became dependent upon it. I actually had to have it to function when I got up in the morning. It wasn't like with methamphetamines when you're coming down. It was more of something mental. This was a physical pain that I had. And to support my habit, we began robbing pharmacies, anything that we could do, stealing, to support this drug habit. So it took me to a whole new life of crime, than the one I had before, and it just increased, and everybody that I was around looked like complete death. I remember everybody being like zombies. When I finally got arrested, I know that God saved my life, because I could remember looking at everybody, and everybody looked like they were dying.
When you say everybody, these were friends of yours hanging out, other people that were also 13, 14 years old?
No, at this time, I was 13 when I started using drugs. I would say at this time I was probably in my early 20s.
Okay.
So that's when I saw a shift, in things that were available, for us on the street.
Now, when you were in your 20s, were you living here in Alabama when you were living this type of lifestyle? Were you in Alabama? Where were you? You were here in Alabama.
I was in Calhoun County.
In Calhoun County. Okay.
Yes, I was.
And so now you talked about being arrested, and I remember you saying that actually that was a saving grace for you at some point.
Yes, it was. I was actually pregnant with my daughter, and I know that she wouldn't have made it. There's no way that she would have survived it. And even in my thinking was so twisted, and people don't really understand, but I was thinking, well, at least if I'm doing this while I'm pregnant, it's cleaner than the meth is. I mean, that's how far gone I was.
You felt that using opioids
Yes.
would be clean. And you know what? I think a lot of people, and I'm not a doctor, of course, and that's not my expertise, but I would imagine, because I have heard people say that if I'm using an opioid, I'm not really a drug user. I'm not abusing drugs because I got this from my doctor.
They're prescribed, and that's why there was such a flood of them when they came out on the market, is because so many people had prescriptions and they were selling them.
Okay.
But when that wasn't available, that's when everybody started going, for me,
And so
heroin.
so you were getting them from people on the streets who were getting them from doctors who had prescribed them for different types of reasons.
They would doctor hop. That was common. 8, 10 different doctors traveling around. That was. I know that they've changed a lot of that now.
Yes,
but
they
back
have.
then, it was pretty common.
Right. When we come back now, I hear my director actually counting down my ear. I mean, I'm sitting here, and I know others are also listening in and chiming in to hear your stories. It's absolutely amazing that you made it through right here in Calhoun County. Because a lot of times when people are at home and they're going through these types of struggles, they're very closed lip about it. They don't want to talk about it. But I want to thank you for coming on board Local Matters to really share your story and to really be open about it, because that's what you're doing right now. You're going out and you're providing a sort of hope for other people who may be experiencing this same type. They may have these same type of issues. They are starting out with drugs and then they find themselves using opioids, thinking that, okay, well, it's going to be okay because, these are not really real drugs. When we come back, we are going to be talking with a doctor out of Macon, Georgia. Dr. Gregory Watley is going to be joining us by phone. We are going to be talking with him because he has really made an impression, so much so with national media outlets. He has been featured, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, CNN, and so many others. We're going to be talking with Dr. Watley to see how he has been managing things there at the Vincent Medical Health Center there in Macon, Georgia. We'll be right back with more Local Matters. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Local Matters, where living local never felt so good. I'm Dottie Rimpsey, and I'm joined with Miss Colony Hughes. If you've just joining us, just chiming in, we've been sitting here all morning long talking about the huge epidemic that is taking place in this country, and that would be the epidemic of an opioid crisis in this country. So I want to welcome Ms. Colony Hughes back again. I want to welcome her and say, if you've missed us and just joining in, Colony has been brave enough to share her own story and how she found herself in trouble a few years ago. She shared with us that she started using drugs when she was about 13, you mentioned?
13.
13. And then by the time you were 20, you were already you had already found yourself sort of navigating to some other things.
Right.
To some opioids you mentioned. And which is not surprising because a lot of times people will do that. You shared with me when you were using opioids, you didn't think that you were really using drugs, per se.
Well, I knew that I was using drugs, but I just thought it was cleaner.
Cleaner. Did you think it was safer?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily safer.
Right.
But it was.
But because I was, and I'm not ashamed to say this because other people have done this too, but because I was pregnant, in my way of thinking that was messed up, I thought it was safer for the baby.
Right.
And it's embarrassing to say, but it's just the truth. It's where I was at.
That's where you were at. And I thank you again for coming on because not many people are able to do that and able to be as brave as you are. But again, this is a national problem, so much so that President Trump has really been putting extra resources in law enforcement hands. Also, hospitals are taking note and they are acting more aggressively as well. In fact, it's not just a problem here, as I mentioned, this is a national problem. I have with me, joining us by phone, Dr. Gregory Watley. Dr. Gregory Watley is an emergency doctor there at the Vincent Medical Health Center in Macon, Georgia. And I might add that he is also a family member. He is a cousin, and so he has roots here. That's why I wanted to bring him on, because he has roots here in Anniston, Alabama. His mother, his grandmother was born here, his mother. He has a host of cousins and aunts and uncles. We're so proud of him. And he is here joining us by phone to talk about the amazing work that he is doing there in the Vincent Medical Center there in Macon, Georgia. So much so that national media outlets have found their way to him to talk about what he's been doing there at Navinson Medical Center. Dr. Watley, are you there with us? Dr. Watley.
Yes, good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon. You might want to speak up a little bit. I could barely hear you. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Right, it's good to have you. Dr. Watley, you know, as I just shared with our guests that you are really sort of homegrown, if you will. This is Anniston. This is you're pretty much, I know you were born in Chicago, but your mother, grandmother, and all of your family, we're still here, so we're so proud of you. But I want to ask you a question. It was just earlier in 2017, you were there in the emergency room, and one night you found and realized that you were really dealing with some very serious problems there in the emergency room. Help us to understand, when did you sort of realize that you were dealing with something more serious than just a few isolated cases of overdosing?
Well, I couldn't, I had a young lady that came in unresponsive, and I had to intubate her. And during the course of her workup, her workup was perplexing. She had multiple organ failure, and so I didn't know if she was had sepsis, which is an overwhelming infection. I didn't know if she had meningitis. She had kidney failure, and so I really didn't know what was going on with her. And at the same time, surrounding me were other physicians talking about a couple of patients that they had that said, oh, well, that sounds like my patient. And then the following evening, well, she actually, after she came, she actually became more awake and pulled the endotracheal tube out of her airway. And I asked her what happened, and so she told me that she took a Percocet from someone on the street. And I heard that again from one of the other doctors. They stated that they had similar patient with multi-organ failure, and the next evening a gentleman came in that I almost had to put on a ventilator, and he said he had bought a Percocet also from someone on the street.
On the
had all this. And so at that point in time, I called Georgia Poison Control and asked them, were they having a particular drug out there on the street, and they said they were not aware of it. And so when I called them back, I told them I think we have a major problem, and that's when the alert went out statewide.
Right. So again, this is, you know, that is absolutely, wow, amazing, because you jumped on the phone when you realized that people were actually buying these Percocets off the streets. And so obviously they must have been laced with something else when you realized it, and you were able to sound the alarm there to the CDC to get them involved.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Watley, that is absolutely amazing, and it's so much so, again, that as I mentioned earlier, that you have been contacted now by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Tell me about what other national media outlets have you spoken with here recently?
Well, I talked to the Washington Post, NBC, and Atlanta Journal-Constitution.
Wow. Dr. Watley, I want to thank you for coming aboard Local Matters and sharing with us what you've done there at Navinson Medical Center. Again, just sometimes that's what it takes, just a doctor going an extra mile, picking up that phone, calling the CDC to say, wait a minute, this is much more than a Percocet. I've got patients coming in here that, as you just mentioned, with organ failure, and there's got to be something more. And they were able to utilize your call in a way to sound the alarm, and they became much more involved. And I want to thank you for your work that you're doing there, and I want to ask and encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. We're proud of you here, and I know that Navinson Medical Center are certainly happy to have you aboard there at the hospital as well.
Thank you.
We are going to be coming back in just a few moments, because we're going to be finishing up with Miss Colony Hughes, because again, just as Dr. Watley just said, he realized that people were buying things buying drugs per se, off of the streets. And that's exactly what you were doing. That's what Colony said she was doing as well. So when we come back, I want to follow up on that. We'll be right back with more Local Matters. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Local Matters. Well, living local never felt so darn good. I'm Dottie Vimpsey. Now, if you're just joining us, just a few moments ago in our prior two segments, we were talking with Dr. Gregory Watley. He is an emergency room doctor there at the Vinson Medical Health Center in Macon, Georgia. And he was kind enough to come aboard with us because he has been recognized by some major media outlets, at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the Washington Post, CNN, just to name a few, for the work that he's been doing there at the medical center there in Macon, Georgia. He shared with us, if you missed his portion, that he noticed that, people were coming in, they were overdosing, but he also shared and got a chance to talk with some of his patients, and they shared with him that they were buying drugs off of the streets. But it seems as though we've now later learned that those drugs were laced with things such as fentanyl. It's one thing. Colony Hughes is here with me on set, and she shared with us that she too found herself at one point buying drugs off of the streets. So it's amazing that that you are not only alive but alive and well, because it could have taken such a hard turn for you when you just buying, and so that is a problem, because again, when people are there on the streets and someone offers you a Percocet or a hydrocodone, you're not really sure what it could be laced with.
Yeah, they don't know now what it's laced with.
They really don't know, but it's deadly and it's taking people. It's really taking lives. You're alive and well, and you're doing amazing things in this community. I know and mentioned earlier that you are the owner and operator of Seven Springs Ministry. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing at Seven Springs Ministry.
Well, since the last time we talked, Seven Springs has expanded. It's a residential treatment program for men and women that are coming out of addiction and any type of other brokenness. We're seeing a lot of things change for the students that are coming in. When the first 2 years we started, about 90% we were seeing were on methamphetamines.
Okay.
Now these last recent 2 years, we're seeing an increase, 90% heroin and fentanyl.
Why, that fentanyl, it's very dangerous. Very dangerous.
And so we've just really increased our outreaches. Last year we had Drug Overdose Awareness Day to honor those, loved ones that we lost. We have GROW meeting that we have every other week, which is just a chance for all the local recovery ministries and churches to just unite together. Even if our views are different on things, it's for one goal. And so we have a meeting on Friday nights where we get together and we fellowship, get to know each other, and have a good time.
Now, where is this on Friday nights? Where is the meeting taking place on Friday nights?
It's currently at Church on the Rock, but you have to see our Facebook page because we move around and we're actually growing out of that space. So we're looking to relocate. So anybody that would want to come would need to just check out our Facebook page.
That's a great problem to have. That's a really great problem to have. A great problem to have when you start to outgrow your space. Okay, so let's go back. Seven Springs Ministry, you have several locations. Help the viewers to know where they are.
We are opening up a new thrift store, and that is to just help our women and women with children program that we have.
Okay.
The women's program is known as the Esther House.
The Esther House.
The Esther House, and all the proceeds going to help women with children.
Okay.
We help women be restored to their children. We work with DHR, and we have a lot of success stories from women that have just amazing testimonies coming out of this addiction and seeing them get their children back. And it's been an amazing journey with them.
So the Esther House, now are women actually living there on the premises there?
Oh, no.
Okay. So
we have a separate location for the women, and the reason we do is because it's predominantly women coming out of addiction, incarceration, homelessness, but we're starting to see more women coming out of sex trafficking. So we have a different location for the women, and then our men's program, we partner with Bob McLeod with Our Father's Arms. He has a medical clinic over in Jacksonville, and so our men are kind of on the other side.
Okay.
And, but yeah, we have those stores, but our office space is located in Anniston. That's where we operate, mostly in Anniston.
So this is amazing. So you and your husband started Seven Springs Ministry. How many years has it been now?
It's been 4 years.
4 years, and already you have three, is it 3 or 4 thrift shop locations?
We have two.
Two now. So I know the one that's headed up Highway 21 north to Jacksonville. And where's the other location?
Well, we're moving that location
Okay, you're
as
moving
well.
that one. Okay.
So anybody that goes to the one to Jacksonville, Midway, Jacksonville, Anniston can just stop by the store and get the new location. So
Okay.
we have a lot going on.
You have a lot, and that's
Yes.
again, that's a good thing to have, that you have a lot going on. I want to thank you, Colony, for coming on and sharing your story, because people need to hear a story like yours. Anybody can find themselves in trouble, because I always say, life happens. Life happens, but not many people can share a story and have a testimony such as yours. And sometimes when people do make it out, it's a shame, but they're ashamed to talk about
Right.
what they've been through. They're ashamed because people may judge them or feel some kind of way about them. But I'm glad that you are not, that you are using what happened to you, a story of hope and inspiration. So again,
Yeah.
where can people call? They can find you on Facebook, right?
Yeah, they can find us on Facebook or at www.sevensprings.org, which is our website. It has links to Esther House, our men's program known as Nehemiah House, our thrift store information, where to drop off donations because we need those,
Right.
and any information that they need. It has our
Okay.
phone numbers and everything on there.
Right.
And I just wanted to say, Dottie, that we don't really have a drug problem. I feel like we have a pain problem.
Yeah.
It's pain and trauma. It's not just internally, physically, where people are medicating.
Yes.
And I believe once they can be healed, that they can really find a purpose.
You said that right, because a lot of people are they're trying to self-medicate
Right.
other pains and other woes.
Yes.
But you have you can help them because you have all of the resources there. So again, Seven Springs Ministry, they have a Facebook page there that Colony just shared with us. So if you want to know more about that particular ministry, please do not hesitate to go to that Facebook page. Thank you and have a good night, everybody. We'll see you next time on Local Matters, because you know why? If it's local, it matters. Good night.